Greetings and salutations, and thanks for watching the video. I appreciate it. Whether it showed up in your autoplay list or whether you clicked on it one way or the other. I used to say all the time, thanks for clicking on the video, and then somebody out there had to just post, I didn't click on it, so it just popped up. Anyway, this video is going to be about a couple things. First of all, I want to talk about Linux Mint coming along. 19 will shortly be released officially. It seems to be sort of a soft start, as they say here on the monthly news on the Linux Mint blog for June 2018, which was published on June the 28th by Linux Mint, that all three editions passed QA yesterday and are slowly sinking worldwide towards the download mirrors. We'll officially announce the stable release of Linux Mint at the end of the week. And so, therefore, we are very close to Linux Mint 19. The truth of the matter is, I am not as excited about this particular release as I thought I would be. And there are several reasons for that. First of all, a lot of folks have been telling me since they have been running the beta that they have found a lot of regressions. And I have come across a couple of things myself, which I will show you shortly. There will be an upgrade path between Linux Mint 18.3 and Linux Mint 19, and they say that they're expecting it to look and work a lot like the one they provided between Linux Mint 17.3 and Linux Mint 18. That's what they're saying, and they'll have those things posted here on the Linux Mint blog when those instructions come along. Honestly, I would not recommend doing an in-place upgrade between 18 dot anything and 19. If you're going to be going to 19, your best bet is to go ahead and back up all the data and then reload the machine. But there will be an option in place if you want to give it a try. And we'll talk about that when that rolls along as well. Probably going to have a couple of videos talking about Linux Mint. I want to do another installation video. And I also want to do one showing the upgrades when they come along. We'll give that a shot in a virtual machine and see how it goes. Then they said that the next thing they're going to get into is LMDE3, aka Cindy, and said that it has the latest cinnamon and all the components which got into Linux 19 already. And then they talk a little bit about why they do the Debian edition and how it is a thing that they do to challenge themselves to create a Debian-based version of Linux Mint. And this is actually quite interesting to read, so you can check out the Linux Mint blog and you can read it for yourself. I will put a link in the description for the video for this exact thing. So Linux Mint 19, I think it's going to be a very stable version of Linux Mint simply because Ubuntu 18.04 is very stable at this point in time. However, I don't know whether it is going to be quite as polished as what we have come to expect. And what I want to do is just jump down and actually look at Linux Mint here running in a virtual machine. Now, these virtual machines are running with a fixed resolution of 1366 by 768. And the reason why I am doing that is because there is a bug right now in VirtualBox that if I full screen the virtual machine, as I have done in past videos, then I lose control of the keyboard. No keyboard action at all, and things become unstable. So for those of you who are watching this on low resolution screens, you have my apologies. But you can still see what I'm going to show you because it's really not that big of a deal. So one of the first things that I noticed about Linux Mint 19 is the fact that the Qt integration is not as good as it was in Linux Mint 18.3. Not nearly as good as it was. So this is Ocean Audio running Qt. I'm not exactly sure what version of Qt this is. And you can see that the theme is not being followed and the text is not being resized at all. And then we have VirtualBox, and this is the one that is in the repositories for Linux Mint. And the the thing that we have now is we have a Qt5 configuration tool, so you can set your fonts. So if you go in here now and you scale the fonts on the desktop, and then you open up a Qt application, it doesn't match. So what you have to do is come over here and try and figure out what matches what you have the scale set at. And it's really quite clunky. In the past on Linux Mint, the Qt applications that I have run just worked, and it didn't matter what version they were, and I don't know what all has changed. I've talked about the divergence between Qt and GTK in several videos because it's getting worse, and it's like no matter how hard the desktop folks try to keep up with it, if it's a GNOME based desktop, it seems to be quite an issue. And so this is kind of just a bit disturbing to me to see this in Linux Mint. I know that I had read when they were talking about the newer releases of Cinnamon that they were no longer going to try and do the Qt integration, that would be left up to the distribution. So maybe this is what we're going to deal with. And no, it's not a deal breaker. I mean, Qt applications work just fine, but the problem is that with Qt not following the font scaling, this can be a huge pain for anybody who has to bump these fonts up, either because they're on a high definition device or they have a vision problem where these fonts become unreadable for them, and big pain in the butt. So the other thing is that I've heard a couple of other people have talked to me about some regressions, and there's a few bugs going on, but we're still not completely out of beta at this point. It's not been officially announced, and this is a beta version we're looking at, so maybe this is something that will be addressed, and some of the other issues. I don't know how many people are going to be affected by these issues, but they are there. And also I have been told that a lot of folks got no response when they did respond to the beta, and even in the monthly newsletter they said that they had to stop reading the comments because they got overwhelmed. That's the Mint development team. So there it is. That is what is going on with Linux Mint 19. Do I think it's still a great Linux distribution and a good place for new users to start? Absolutely. There just may be some growing pains in this particular edition of Linux Mint. Now, I'm not really thrilled about Linux Mint 19 being my daily driver, simply because of the fact that I do use VirtualBox, and I use this application, Ocean Audio, and a couple of other of Qt applications, and I kind of like things to look the same. So I had this idea in my little punky head that I would maybe jump over to KDE Plasma for a while. This is Kubuntu 1804. Everybody's talking about how great this is, and it is. And you can see here that I have Ocean Audio, exactly the same application that I'm using it for the example in the other machine, and it's following the theme, and the text is properly sized, and it looks nice. And then we go over here, and now I have VirtualBox running. Now this is VirtualBox running within a VirtualBox virtual machine with a test VM in it. And no, it won't boot. I've actually not installed anything. I just wanted to see what it looked like on the screen. And not only that, if we open up this virtual machine here, and I open up Disks, which is a GNOME application that I installed, look at how nice the GTK3 applications are being handled. I mean, not quite as pretty with the Breeze Dark theme, but very nice. And the Kubuntu development team just did a fantastic job on this. Now, why am I not running it full time? It's because, well, there is a problem with screen tearing and NVIDIA cards. And the last time that I loaded up the KDE Plasma 5 desktop, which was KDE Neon, not Kubuntu, but it was still a KDE-based desktop, it didn't work well with my video card at all. I got lots of screen tearing and artifacts and weird issues going on, so I had to go back to something else. So that's going, that's the only reason at this point why I'm going to keep away with it. I went and looked for that issue before I actually pulled the trigger on a full install, and sure enough, there was a bug that was filed for exactly the issue that I had before, and this was on Kubuntu 18.04. So I am following that bug, and we'll see what happens. And if they come along and say, hey, we got an easy fix for this, I might run to it. Now, like I said, this affects me. If you have AMD or if you have Intel for your graphics, maybe some NVIDIA it doesn't affect. Maybe you're not going to use the NVIDIA proprietary drivers. All that kind of stuff might not be a problem for you. This would definitely be a problem for me. I've got to have smooth video playback. I can't stand it if it doesn't work right. So that's keeping me off of KDE Plasma Desktop right now. But Kubuntu is awesome, gang. That's a really cool distribution. And if you want to dabble with KDE, I think that's probably the best way to go, because with Kubuntu 18.04, you're talking about a long-term support release operating system running a long-term support kernel with the long-term support version of the KDE Plasma Desktop. That's sweet. That means you won't have to worry about this thing for like 3 years at all. And then even after that, it'll keep running for another 2. So you don't even have to think twice about it. Very good job there. A lot of folks talking about how they're liking KDE. And I used to hate KDE. I was hating on KDE all the time a few years ago when they were having some problems with it. But they have really done a lot with this. Now, KDE is a completely different experience from any GNOME-based desktop or even XFCE. It's very different than MATE or any of the other desktops. So it does take a bit of getting used to, but I do have to say that the Kubuntu folks have done a real good job with defaults as far as what is set up when you open it up. It's very nice, very good job. So the other one I wanted to talk about was the Ubuntu MATE desktop, which they do a really nice job of the integration for Qt, and I don't have a bunch of Qt apps loaded on this to show you. It works pretty well. It doesn't necessarily follow the theme, but at least the text is rendered properly and at the right size. It will follow whatever you set in the desktop. So kudos to the folks at the Ubuntu MATE project for doing a good job with Qt integration. And this is just a really nice desktop. I have helped several people get started with Ubuntu 18.04 MATE edition with the MATE desktop. Yes, I know it is spelled M-A-T-E for you newbies out there. Before you post a comment, we call it MATE. That's the way it is. And yes, I'm pointing that out yet again for those of you who say, why do you point that out? Because there's always some turkey that goes, why are you calling it that? It's spelled M-A-T-E. It's mate. It's not MATE. Look it up. Anyway, this works really quite well. This is the Redmond layout. This is the exact setup that I just put my brother on. I just moved him from Linux Lite to Ubuntu MATE on his ancient Dell machine. And that machine has 2 gigabytes of RAM in it, and it's a 32-bit Pentium 4 processor in that sucker, and it actually works really well. He uses it every day. Believe it or don't, it runs really well. And that's another thing that is really nice, is that the Ubuntu MATE project is distributing a 32-bit version, and so is Kubuntu. There's a 32-bit version of that as well with the KDE desktop, so that's pretty cool as well. I didn't know that until I started playing with it just the other day. Now, why am I not using the Ubuntu MATE 18.04 desktop as my daily driver right now? Well, I got one major issue, and that is that I cannot get the thing to auto-suspend at all. And I'm kind of used to this workflow where I get up and walk away from the computer, and if I don't come back in an hour, I want the computer to go to sleep. And I want it to stay asleep until I come back, which could be 2 days later, see? But just for me, on my old hardware, on my machine, that feature just doesn't work. It will not auto-suspend, so I can't use it. And I ran it for a few days and really like the desktop and really like the way they have this thing figured out. And it runs really well. Of course, now it's running GTK3. Wait a minute, didn't I install that? No, you didn't install that. Let's go ahead and install that while I'm here talking about it. This just really runs quite well. It uses lower system resources than most of the desktops. It is not quite as lightweight as it has been in the past because now it's mostly on GTK3, that toolkit, but it runs really well. So kudos to the Ubuntu MATE team. So what is my desktop? Well, my desktop, as you can see, is Ubuntu, vanilla Ubuntu with the GNOME desktop. That's what I have been running since February on this machine. I have jumped off to try other things and then come back to it. I just switched the drives in and out. So this is my desktop. This has been my daily driver. And this is after I was ragging on GNOME, talking about how messed up it was for so long. And I didn't like it, and I didn't like the direction it was going. And then Ubuntu came along, and they came out with this particular version. And no, I don't have a whole lot of plugins in here, and I don't have a lot of extensions. It's just because I've never really messed with it that much. This has been the most stable Linux experience that I have ever had in the 10 years that I've been using Linux. Never seen anything like this. This desktop on this machine has not crashed once. And yes, the GNOME desktop does take up a bit more memory because it puts a lot of the desktop in memory when it boots up. Right now we're using a huge amount of memory because I've got a bunch of virtual machines open. But that doesn't seem to be an issue. It seems to make the desktop snappy and quick. I haven't had any problems with it freezing, locking up. It works well with the drivers for my NVIDIA card. The only issue that I have come across is in VirtualBox, that if I full screen a virtual machine, what happens is that virtual machine, I just lose keyboard control. Other than that, everything works. So I'm sticking with this because it's working. I've got two machines now that are running this exact setup, which is just Ubuntu vanilla GNOME desktop. And it has just been unbelievably smooth and worked really, really well for what I want to do. I can look at this. I've got all these virtual machines running. I'm capturing video as we speak. We're sitting here talking. I've got programs running in the background that don't even show up, and it's like it's amazing. So that's where I'm at right now. And we'll see. Let's wait and see what happens with Linux Mint 19. Hopefully, they're not going to just stop the development after the official release because, like I said, people are coming back and saying there are some bugs, there are some issues, and we'll see what happens with that. But for now, I intend to stick right here. This has worked since I installed this in beta in February, and it is almost the end of June. It's almost July. So it's been an amazing experience. And when Ubuntu 18.04.1 comes out, that'll be the first little dot release that they'll come out with. I have absolutely no plans to upgrade to that. I will stay right here. This is 18.04 dot whatever, and we'll stay on that long-term support kernel that's going to be patched for the next 5 years on this hardware. It just works and it keeps running. So I figured I would share that with you guys. It's kind of where my head is at. Linux is better than it's been in a long, long time. But at the same time, it's like you come up on these things and it's like, there's not a thing wrong with Linux Mint 18.3. And the only reason that I'm moving ahead is because I wanted to get some more updated VirtualBox software. If you don't use that, you can stay right where you are on 18.3 until 2021 or however long it's supported. You don't have to upgrade. You don't have to move on. We just talk about this because we're looking at it. And if it solves a problem for you, or if you just want to play with it, you can go right ahead. I need to point that out as well because people always say, well, do I absolutely have to upgrade? No. If you're happy with Linux Mint 18.3, please stay with it. As a matter of fact, I will be leaving one of my machines on Linux Mint 18.3 because there is a bug in Ubuntu 18.04, and so 18.04 don't work so good on that machine. There's a system debug where what it does is it basically can't find the anything you plug into a USB, it messes up UDEV, and so it takes up 100% of the CPU the whole time that you're running it. And I'm following that bug as well, hoping it will go away, and that's because that's an older Core Duo machine. But it runs beautifully on Linux Mint 18.3, and I have no reason to change it because everything works just fine. So do keep that in mind as you listen to these videos. You don't have to do anything. You could stay right with what you've got, which is kind of what I wanted to get across in this video, was the fact that, find what works for you and stick with it. That seems to be, that's the moral of the story of my ramble and talking about my experimentations with all of these different desktops and stuff that I have been playing with for quite some time now. So I got about 4 or 5 virtual machines running, keeping an eye on things. And you may be asking yourself, well, there's one desktop you're not talking about, and that's XFCE, and that's absolutely true. XFCE doesn't work very well on this hardware. I've got some issues with, once again, like KDE, where you got screen tearing on the video, and just activating the vertical sync on that doesn't seem to help. So therefore I am sticking with things that have a more sophisticated compositor. So if you do something like GNOME, then the GNOME desktop, that particular compositor fixes that problem, the sync issues for my video card. And the same thing happens with the Cinnamon desktop, because they have the Muffin compositor in there, and that works quite well. And with the latest version of the MATE desktop, now they have that new Marco that they have in there, that compositor. That works quite well, and it works great with this old hardware as well. But KDE and XFCE, they give me a problem as far as all that is concerned. So I think that's enough for now. I have rambled on, and thank you for watching the video. I do appreciate it. There'll be more videos to come. This was just kind of an update on what was going on, and sit back and kind of ramble on with you guys for a bit. By the way, not doing the Easy Linux show format has already paid off, because the last 2 videos I have posted, they have just taken off views-wise. And I can tell you that if Easy Linux show was in the title, they wouldn't have that kind of spread. When you're thinking about, if you're thinking about doing YouTube ever, don't fall into that trap of doing a regular show, and because it seems to, at least in my experience, it cuts your views back quite a bit. You just don't get the discoverability. And I have kind of proven to myself and anybody else who's watching that, yeah, the Easy Linux show was a good idea, and it was kind of cool in some ways, but the last couple of videos, boy, they've taken off. So thank you to everybody who has watched those videos and subscribed. I certainly do appreciate it. And we will be back again to do this soon. Yes, your feedback is welcome. I'd like to hear from you about ideas for future videos. What would you like to see? Also, check out Easy Linux on Facebook. There's more stuff gets posted there than what you see on YouTube, and that usually has something going on with it on a daily basis. So if you are a Facebook person still, then you can check out Easy Linux on Facebook and give it a like if you would. Also, check out freedompenguin.com for lots of cool content about Linux. My videos post there. Several other people's do as well. And there's content that comes from Matt Hartley, who is the founder of freedompenguin.com. Matt posts some good stuff, so do check that out as well. And I'm gone. I'll talk to you again soon.